Hello everyone, Shay Harris here with Serenity Now Real Estate in Central Texas. I want to take a few minutes to discuss what's going on with the NAR lawsuit. What we have is hundreds of thousands of sellers, now plaintiffs, who sold their homes between the year of 2015 and 2020, I believe. They signed a listing agreement, which clearly discloses the commission fee and the split the listing agent intends to make with the buyer's agent. These sellers put their homes on the market, accepted offers, made it all the way to the closing table. Having looked at the closing documents, which also shows them the divide between the brokers involved with the selling of their homes, they were not coerced to list, to accept offers, or close. They chose to sell their homes under the terms that they were aware of, and they received those closing proceeds and happily went on their way, only to later decide that they should not have been made to pay the buyer agent's commission. So they're suing under the Sherman Antitrust Act, which is a law designed to protect consumers from big businesses. The lawsuit names NAR, or the National Association of Realtors, plus 4 of the nation's largest brokerages, including Anywhere Real Estate, Home Services of America, RE/MAX, Keller Williams. Anywhere used to be called Realogy, so under that brokerage includes Better Homes, Century 21, Coldwell Banker, Sotheby's, just to name a few. As of today, Anywhere has decided to avoid an expensive and lengthy trial, and they've settled for $83.5 million. RE/MAX has also decided to settle for $55 million. The court still needs to approve those settlements, but that is a lot of money. Now, keep in mind, settling does not mean that they agree that these sellers should not have had to pay the buyer's agent. It just means that they'd rather pay this amount than the potential larger amount that they would have to pay if they lost in court. If they lost in court, it could very well put them out of business entirely. So they just settled. But you know who's not settling? NAR. NAR has chosen not to settle, but to battle this case out in court. And that trial is supposedly scheduled for this month, which is October 2023. Now, agents are a little nervous about how this is going to impact their business and how they will function if it does. I'm seeing different reactions. Agents who operate solely as buyer agents are a little nervous. Listing agents are a little excited. They would prefer that buyers come directly to them anyway, right? And then they get more commission if that happens. In the long run, sellers may convince them to bring their standard commission fee down, since there's no longer a buyer's agent to split it with. I'm sure they don't want that to happen, because then there's no opportunity to walk away with more commission. Plus, they have an increased amount of work, just assisting the buyer along in the transaction so that everything goes smoothly. Remember, that's traditionally what the buyer's agent is for, to represent and to assist the buyer for a smooth transaction. So when you take the buyer's agent away, that buyer only has the listing agent to rely on, who obviously only represents the seller. Is that listing agent going to inform the buyer of his or her rights, or is that listing agent going to see their ignorance as an opportunity that benefits their seller? So while they're expected to be ethical towards the buyer, they still do not represent them. They represent the best interests of the seller. Personally, I foresee a lot of buyers being taken advantage of, being misinformed, partially informed, or not informed at all. I see them being left in the dark about a lot of things the buyer's agent would traditionally inform them of. I see buyers trying to represent themselves who have no idea what their rights are per the contract. So listing agents may be excited that they could potentially walk away with more money with no buyer's agents. On the other hand, buyer's agents are wondering where they fall if commissions are no longer being paid to them. So let's look at that. Let's say the buyer does not have a buyer's agent representing them, making sure they know their rights in the transaction, looking out for their best interests. If the MLS listing for the home of their choice says 0 in the commission field, that means that particular seller is not willing to pay a buyer agent's commission. The buyer would have to pay that commission, which traditionally is about 3%. So to clarify, in the United States, traditionally, the seller would be the one to pay their listing agent full commission, with the understanding that that commission would be split with another agent. It's been done this way because 2 agents are usually involved with the selling of the home. Typically, the buyer that comes along is represented, and together those two agents, make the deal happen. The listing agent puts the home on the market. The selling agent or the buyer's agent sells the home. This is how it's been done in this country. Moreover, the seller typically has equity to pay commission out of. The buyer, on the other hand, would need to come up with 3% out of pocket on top of their down payment and their closing costs. So for a $350,000 home, that's the average price in my area in Central Texas, Fort Cavazos. 3% of $350,000 is $10,500 more that a buyer will need to come up with to purchase the home. So sellers have equity, usually, and buyers would have to come out of pocket. Because it's the seller's home they're ultimately trying to sell, they would pay commission out of their equity if need be. What happens if things change and buyers need to pay that instead? It's pretty simple. Not as many buyers buying, not as many homes selling. And if you're one of those sellers trying to sell a home to a buyer, you may want to consider the buyer agent's side of the transaction and value it as much as you value your listing agent if you want to sell your home. Let's talk about the value of the buyer's agent that the sellers in this lawsuit felt should not have been paid, at least by them anyway. There's a misconception that buyer agents just open doors and are not entitled to the commission that they've traditionally been paid. A buyer agent's job with the buyer begins when they actually speak with that buyer for the first time. This buyer may or may not be ready to buy. They may have credit issues or familial issues that need to be worked through prior to purchasing. What sellers do not see is the buyer's agent guiding them through possible credit repair, helping coordinate them with the right lender, touching base with them periodically over the course of what could be months or years to get them ready to buy what ultimately will be your home. You don't see the multiple homes that buyer was taken to help them better decide which home is the right one for their family, only to eventually be shown yours by the agent and decide that your home is indeed the one they want. That agent guides them in making an offer on your home. All the seller sees is that this buyer wants their home, but this buyer has been nurtured by that agent for months, maybe even years, leading up to the purchase of your home. So yes, they've earned their commission from the selling of your home, no question. Are there lazy agents out there who just open doors and don't guide their clients through the process the way that they should? Absolutely. But that goes for both buyer agents and listing agents. And some would say listing agents just put a sign up, take a few photos, and sit back and wait on other agents to sell the home. Some would argue it's the buyer's agents that deserve commission more so than the listing agents. But this is not a competition. I'm not taking sides. I'm actually a listing agent and a buyer's agent, so I understand both sides of the coin. And one thing I do know without a doubt is that both agents are involved in the selling of the home. And both are valuable to the transaction and should be seen as such by the seller. So who really loses if the day comes when buyer agents are no longer offered commission for their work? The buyer loses. If they choose to go directly to the listing agent, they'll be doing so without representation. If they do hire a buyer's agent, they would have to pay them out of pocket to buy a home, and they may not be able to afford that on top of everything else. The seller loses because their home may sit much longer with a smaller pool of buyers to choose from. Not to mention, I wonder how many lawsuits will result from buyers feeling misinformed or uninformed by the listing agent that they chose to go directly to. The seller also loses because, let's face it, how many buyer agents will look at that zero on the listing and decide not to forward that to their buyers? It happens. It does happen. And some brokers that have decided to leave NAR are still vowing to encourage their agents to show any and all homes regardless of the commission split. But will that happen? Realistically, will that happen? So again, you're minimizing interests in your home for the many agents out there with buyers on standby. So in the end, the takeaway is for sellers to understand the value of the selling agent, understand the realistic financial stance of your buyers out there, and understand the reason why this country has operated in this manner for as long as it has. But we shall see how all plays out in the end. So that's all I have for you guys for now. Thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time.